All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This episode, we're doing another, I think we're going to do another one of our kind of quarantine series. We haven't done them for about a month, I guess. We did a couple and then we didn't do them for a couple of weeks, but I think this one and another episode that we're recording today are going to be lockdown specials, if you will. And this movie, I think, is even probably more relatable at this point in the having to stay at home to stay safe than the other ones that we did before, which those ones were kind of like hokey zombie virus type of movies. But this one is, at least when I think of this movie, this is like one of the most, or the best, I should say, better, maybe even, isolation movies, if you will. And we're talking about 1990's Misery.
Oh, man, it was 1990. I didn't even know that. But that makes sense. It came out right around then. I thought it was a little bit later.
No, yeah, it was 1990, but it definitely has that kind of that feel of that early's 90, at least to me anyway. I mean, you could throw this in the same kind of realm of like Silence of the Lambs or any of those other movies that came out in that time frame, and that more of the, I don't know if you want to call them intellectual horror, but that kind of a little bit more on the sort of like artsy side of horror back in the day, stylized horror maybe even.
So was this like the next Stephen King adaptation after Pet Sematary? Because that was 89, so this must have followed right away.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, I don't remember though, because it came out right around that time. I mean, this was 30 years ago, but I want to say that really ever since like whenever Carrie came out in the 70s till now, I kind of think Hollywood's been on a Stephen King craze ever since. Because I mean,
oh, that's so crazy. You're so right. Yeah, because absolutely, yeah, because you think Carrie, and sometime after that was what, The Shining, because that was like still 70s, I think, right?
Well, and then you had,
or was that 80s?
No, The Shining was, when was that? Was that 80, 81, something like that?
Maybe it was early 80s.
But yeah, you had like Salem's Lot and all of that stuff back in those days. I mean, it's just nuts. Anytime you think of it, I mean, this isn't the first Stephen King thing we've done by a long shot. Heck, I mean, we've even done like Graveyard Shift we talked about last year. But it's weird because anytime you talk about a Stephen King adaptation, and you're like, oh, I wonder if this came right after that. But, what else came out around those times? And if you like look into it, it's like weird, like how many adaptations there were. And then, at least for me, anytime I look, there's always like 5 that snuck in there, like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And he's always got stuff coming too. I mean, he's got like 3 different things like in the works now even.
Good grief. Yeah, it's weird to think back how like he was. I mean, when you think of Carrie, that was huge in the 70s, and now you think of the 80s, and he was massive in the 80s. Like with there was always a Stephen King movie, Cujo, Christine, later on Pet Sematary, and then you think the 90s like with Misery, and and now it's like now he's back with like obviously the It chapters 1 and 2 were huge, and obviously they're sort of reboots or whatever, but at the same time it's like this guy's been on a roll for his whole career.
What's funny is because last year they remade, was it last year or the year before, they remade Pet Sematary?
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised that there's never been like any buzz to remake Misery. Really, I mean, I don't think that there needs to be a remake of Misery, but especially, the way that Hollywood goes anymore. Well, used to go anyway. I'm kind of curious to actually how Hollywood is going to go once this is all over with. But
yeah, Misery is one of those films, and it's kind of strange. Like you bring up Pet Sematary too. I would have at the time would have said the same thing as well. As like Pet Sematary to me did not need to be remade. It was a really good movie as is, and I think of Misery when I watch that film. It's like, yeah, I mean, the acting and the performances are so good that I can't picture them doing a better job of it. And I think back to like the Carrie remake that we had, earlier in the 2000s, and that one I enjoyed it, but at the same time, you look back to the original Sissy Spacek version from the 70s, and it's still the superior version. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll eventually get to Misery, but maybe it's just not like the one that they think are going to get a lot of people in the seats. So
No, I can't imagine it would, but.
So when do you remember first seeing this film? Did you see it back in the day?
Oh, probably, yeah. I mean, I know I saw it a ton of times back then. But back then, too, I mean, I was also a big Stephen King fan by this time. This would have been 90, so not quite high school age yet. But,
Yeah.
I remember reading a bunch of Stephen King stuff. I don't remember if I ever read this story back then, because I don't know if this one would have piqued my interest, because there wasn't really any monsters in it or anything, because that's one of the things with some of the Stephen King stories. I mean, you have like Pet Sematary and stuff that has sort of that supernatural element to it, but then you have other Stephen King stuff that is more realistic. I remember reading or trying to read Gerald's Game at one point, which is another one that got adapted not too long ago. When I was like in my like early teens, like 13 or 14 years old. And, it just was about this woman that was tied to a bed. I was like, oh, this is stupid. I don't want to read this. This isn't going to be scary. And then going back and like reading it later and be like, oh man, that was great. But like Misery, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw it back in the day. And because if I remember right, because my mom was a pretty big Stephen King fan too. So she probably would have been the one that rented it when it came out on video to rent.
Yeah, I think I definitely remember seeing it back in like when it first came out, like on video or cable or one of the two, probably video. It was one of those films, kind of like you said, it's a little bit more cerebral. It wasn't one like, it wasn't a slasher film. It wasn't like Pet Sematary, which, is a little bit more of that kind of the horror element. I think that, to me, like Pet Sematary is my favorite Stephen King flick and book, to be honest with you. That, I mean, I haven't read all of them, but so this one was a little bit more, more kind of had leaned towards like what we talked about, like drama, a little bit more intellectual or what have you. And so it wasn't like a repeat viewing for me. It wasn't one that I was going to go, oh, I'm going to watch Misery every Friday night. It's not like a beer and popcorn movie, so to speak.
I was probably the same way, but now, like, it's not my favorite, but this has become one of my favorite Stephen King stories over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie, the thing with this movie is, I remember seeing it like way back in the day, and I remember we've talked about this before too, because this one had some buzz back in it would have been like 91, I guess, probably, when the Oscars came out that year, because Kathy Bates won an Oscar for this movie, which is pretty cool. But
very cool.
Because I think the story itself is one of those, when you're like a teenager, you're like, you don't really get it. But then as you get older, it's one of these things where you're like, you know what, that could really freaking happen. And that's some scary ass shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see the movie for a long time. And then I ended up picking it up on VHS probably like 3 or 4 years ago. It was just one of those things where I was like at some thrift store and I was like, oh, Misery, cool. I haven't seen this for a long time. Let me get that. I remember I picked it up and then I was like, you know what? Before I watch this, I'm going to reread the book. And so then I reread the book and I was like, damn, that's a good book. And then I watched the movie again, and probably the first time I saw it, probably in whatever, 15, 20 years. And then I was like, damn, that's a good movie.
How would you compare the book to the movie?
There's definitely some differences, but this to me is it's not my favorite Stephen King story, and it's not my favorite adaptation of his, but it is one of the best adaptations, and it's probably actually one of the closest adaptations that they've done. I mean, they changed a few things and then they added some stuff in the movie, but I mean, overall, it's not one of those where you get done with the movie and you're like, oh, what the hell did they change that for? That's dumb. Or why didn't they have that in there? So, I mean, it's pretty close. The biggest difference is the hobbling scene. I mean, in the movie, it's freaking gruesome as hell. But in the book, she, instead of like breaking his ankles, she like cut his leg off.
Really?
Yeah.
Just one of his legs?
Yeah, I think she cuts one of his legs off, and then if I remember right, she ended up cutting like one of his thumbs off or something.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, like it's pretty gruesome.
She cuts his whole leg off.
Like at the knee. With an axe.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that's probably one of the most iconic scenes in the film too. As soon as she puts that wood block between his legs.
Well, that's one of the, we've talked about cringeworthy scenes before. I mean, and actually somebody was just talking about this on, I think like on one of the Joe Bob Briggs Facebook groups the other day. What's the most cringeworthy moment you've had in a movie? And a bunch of people were like talking about different stuff. And I had mentioned the scene in Hellraiser, the back of the hand across the nail scene.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But, some people were like, oh, the hobbling scene in Misery. Ugh, it gives me the willies. And then it was funny because, getting ready for this, I was like, oh, I got to watch Misery. And so I threw it on the other day. And it was after I read on Facebook or whatever. And I threw it on, and I knew this scene was coming, but it does. I mean, it's kind of cringeworthy to me, but it's not as bad because I've twisted my ankle before, and that kind of hurts. But I mean, I can't imagine how like getting an axe or not an axe, but a sledgehammer to the ankle would feel. Mm-hmm. But that scene came on, and my wife was on the couch, and she was like, "Oh, girl!"
Was this her first time seeing it?
No, but she was just like, "I hate that scene." I'm like, "Oh, maybe that is one of the most cringeworthy scenes."
Yeah, that's a great scene. One thing too that I noticed watching it again, there was some elements of that reminded me of Psycho, and which I thought were kind of interesting. Like, obviously Kathy Bates' character is very mentally ill, very disturbed, and she kind of had the Norman Bates thing going, in my opinion. Like, she kind of had that like real. How he's like super friendly and this just kind of real super nice guy. And when you like sit down and talk to him, he's like, yeah, this is, you want to have a sandwich with me and that kind of thing. And she kind of had that vibe too. And then the scene where the sheriff like goes through her house and is like walking around, it reminded me of the scene when the sister in Psycho goes through the Bates house and she's like looking through the rooms and because the house was kind of like the same type of like that same era, and even like where the basement was located was very similar to the cellar in Psycho, and like where the fruit cellar was and all of that. So kind of gave me that like a lot of Psycho vibes, which I thought was kind of cool.
Oh, cool! Yeah, I've never picked up on that.
Yeah,
but I can, now that you mention it, I can definitely see that for sure.
And I gotta say, Kathy Bates' performance was just. As Annie, it was just amazing. She was so good in this film.
Oh, I mean,
she is so disturbed. And that one scene where she comes out and she's like, she goes into the room and it's raining that night, and she's like talking to Paul, and he's sitting there and by the typewriter, and she's like pulls the gun out of her robe pocket and is like, "Yeah, I've got this gun. I better leave before I put bullets in it." And it's like the way her performance is at is just amazing. You totally buy everything that every time she's on screen.
Well, and what's great about her in this, is like like you had said, you just kind of believe it. One of the things with her portrayal of Annie Wilkes in this is she kind of became that character in a sense, because anytime you watched Kathy Bates in anything else, when you first like see her come on screen, you're like, oh, hey, it's Annie Wilkes. That's cool. But she's such a good actress that usually, by the time she gets into whatever the role she's playing, then you're like, oh, no, that she's whatever character she's supposed to be in this movie. She just becomes that character, which is so cool. But going back to like the whole adaptation thing, one thing I did want to mention is that the show, Castle Rock, that's on Hulu. They did season 2 of that show earlier this year, and that show is kind of interesting, if you're a Stephen King fan, because it's not necessarily derived off of one specific Stephen King story, but it's like based in the Stephen King world. And season 2 was kind of supposed to be a prequel to Misery, so it had a younger Annie Wilkes in it. And I remember when that show first came out, I can't remember the actress's name that played Annie in that show, but she was kind of attractive. And early on when it came out, it was kind of the whole like all the the Batman stuff, when people were like, oh, why is that person playing Annie Wilkes? Annie Wilkes isn't supposed to be attractive. It's like anytime, like when Heath Ledger was going to be the Joker, or even back in '88 when, it came out that Michael Keaton was going to be Batman, and everybody's like, what the fuck? Beetlejuice is not going to be Batman, or not Beetlejuice, but, Mr. Bomb was going to be Batman.
That's how I saw it back then.
Yeah, but anyway, I remember like when season 2 was coming out, and like everybody's like, oh, Annie Wilkes can't be attractive. Annie Wilkes can't be attractive. They didn't really touch on it in the movie, but they did touch on it in the book. There's a part, that scene is in the movie. So it's when Paul escapes the room one of the times, and he's reading through that like scrapbook that she's got of all of the murders and stuff.
Oh yeah.
In that book, in the movie, they put like a picture of Kathy Bates when she was younger, but in the book, it actually even mentions like there was a photograph of a young Annie Wilkes, and Paul was kind of taken by that she used to be attractive at one point. But then there's also a couple of other things like in the movie, when you watch the movie after you watch season 2 of Castle Rock, you're like, oh, cool. That was in that TV show. That's cool. Cause there's like one piece, Annie's got that little shrine for Paul on her like hutch or whatever, where she's got all of his books. And then there's that a signed picture of him. She gets that picture signed in the TV show. So it's kind of cool to see a connection there. This is one of those movies, I don't think if you're like a younger person, I don't think you really appreciate it. But then as you get older, you're like, whoa, that's a really good movie. And I would assume like somebody like you particular, like when you watch this movie, it probably kind of hits home just a little bit.
You think so?
Your career, what you're doing now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No.
Not that you're a crazy person. That's not what I meant to say.
No, I didn't know if you meant because like, I've written a few things in the past.
No.
Okay. Yeah, for the mental health aspect of it. Yeah. No, I can totally, absolutely. And I big time nowadays, every time I watch a movie, I kind of do like an analysis of people's mental health. So this one was definitely a good one for that. And it was very interesting too. And I actually really, really enjoyed watching it again. I think it's because I hadn't seen it in a long time. I knew what happened for the most part. There were a few things I didn't fully remember, but going back and watching it again was quite a treat. So I would give this one a huge thumbs up. This is a film that I just enjoyed from beginning to end, and it's one of the better Stephen King films in my opinion. Again, I think I've said this before, but Pet Sematary is still my favorite story of his, but I really enjoyed this one. So big time thumbs up for it.
Yeah, I would agree. Big thumbs up for me as well. Like you said before, this is not your typical beer and popcorn movie that we talk about on here.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't think this is a movie that, man, I don't think you could watch this one all the time. I mean, I've seen it a couple of times over the past couple of years, but this isn't like a Halloween or any of the Friday the 13th or something where you're like, oh man, I need something to throw on. It's Friday night. I need something to just chill at the end of the work week. Oh, get some cool kills.
This isn't Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2.
No, not, yeah, this isn't something you throw on just to. I mean, I know that, and if you're listening to this, you're in the same. Well, unless you're just checking us out for some weird reason. But I mean, if you're listening to this, you're probably the same way that we are. You enjoy horror. And I know that a lot of people are like, oh, why do you like horror? That's weird. But there's a lot of times where you're like, oh, man, you know what? I just need to kind of wind down a little bit. And I did this actually last night. I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch a vampire movie. And so I brought up all of my vampire VHS and I put them down. And I called my daughter down and I was like, we're going to watch a vampire movie. Come and pick one. And she was like, oh, I like the font on this one. Let's watch this one. And it was the original Dracula. I'm like, perfect.
Ooh, cool.
Throw it in. But like Misery is not like a movie you're like you can watch it. Of course, you can definitely watch it. But this isn't a movie that I think if you watched like multiple times in a certain time frame, maybe you and Annie are more similar than you think. Because it's not a movie that, if you watch, it's like Commando, like I watched Commando last week and my wife's like, oh, you're watching this again? I'm like, I love this movie.
Oh,
it's
Commando's a great movie.
Fun. Misery is not a fun movie. You're not like, you don't come out of Misery going, yeah, that was awesome. Next, we're going to watch Schindler's List and it's going to be a great night.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Commando. Oh gosh, that's a great like beer and popcorn film. It's just fun. It's just stupid fun.
Yep.
But yeah, Misery's a little bit more intense, a little deeper concepts, deeper storyline, and not always pleasant, and not something that you're going to sit back and say, yeah, I want to go watch that again.